Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're getting into one of the biggest choices you have to make if you're building with AI right now. It all boils down to this. Do you use the raw power of a long context model, or do you go with the surgical precision of RAG? And trust me, this isn't just some techie detail. It's a massive strategic decision that's going to shape your project's cost, its speed, and what it can even do. Okay, so let's just think about this for a second. We've got models now that can swallow 1 million tokens at once, and if you think of tokens as little pieces of words, that's like the entire Harry Potter series in one go. So it's super tempting to just dump everything in there, right? But is that brute force approach always the smartest play? We're going to dig in and see if just using a fire hose of information is really the best or, most cost-effective way to get the job done.
So, this whole thing really comes down to two completely different ways of thinking about how to give an AI knowledge. On one side, you've got long context. And on the other, you have retrieval augmented generation, or as pretty much everyone calls it, RAG. So let's break down what each of these actually means. First up is long context. The best way to think about this is like an all-knowing librarian. The approach is powerful because it's so simple. You just hand the model everything, every book, every report, every scrap of code, all at once in one giant prompt. The model then just holds all of that in its working memory ready to answer your question. It's seen literally everything. Now, on the complete other end of the spectrum, you've got RAG. And RAG is like an expert researcher. It doesn't even try to read the whole library. No way. Instead, it does a super fast, targeted search to find the exact right paragraph on the right page of the right book. Then it just hands that tiny, super relevant piece of info to the model. It's this little two-step dance. First find, then think. Okay, so we've got these two totally different philosophies. So the billion-dollar question is, which one should you actually use in the real world? And to figure that out, well, we've got to follow the money. We have to talk about cost. All right, let's make this real. Let's set up a super common scenario. Imagine you've got a big, beefy document. Let's say it's about 100,000 tokens long, like a dense financial report. And your app needs to answer about 1,000 questions from users about that report every single month. Okay? So let's do the math. And wow, the results are not even in the same ballpark. With the long context approach, you're literally paying to process that entire massive document for every single query. And that's what jacks the cost up to over $1,000 a month. The RAG approach, on the other hand, a measly $36. I mean, just let that sink in for a second. For this really common situation, RAG isn't just a little bit cheaper, it's 28 times more cost-effective. That's the kind of number that gets a project greenlit or completely shut down. But hold on, because cost isn't everything, right? So you're probably asking, okay, if long context costs a fortune, why does it even exist? Well, the answer is that there are very specific times when you absolutely need that raw power. It's all about picking the right tool for the job. You wouldn't use a sledgehammer to hang a picture frame. So where does long context win? It's perfect when you're dealing with just a few documents and they don't change very often. Think about analyzing a really complex legal contract. You can't just look at one clause in isolation, right? You need the AI to see the entire document at once to understand how everything connects. It's also great if you're just prototyping and you don't want to mess around with setting up a whole vector database. But RAG is the workhorse. This is where it really shines, especially for big applications. If you're building a chatbot on top of your company's entire knowledge base, we're talking hundreds, maybe thousands of documents. Long context isn't even an option. It just won't fit. And RAG's a no-brainer if your data is always changing, like a newsfeed. Or, and this is super important, if you need to lock things down so users only see the info they have permission to see. Okay, but here's the real pro move. What if I told you that you don't actually have to pick just one? This is where things get really clever. The most sophisticated builders out there, they're mixing and matching. They're creating these hybrid systems that give you the best of both worlds, the sharp, targeted search of RAG and the deep, big picture understanding of long context. So how does this actually work? It's pretty elegant, really. First, you let RAG do its thing. It acts as a smart filter, quickly finding, say, the top 20 documents that seem relevant. Then, the system does a quick check. Okay, how big are these 20 docs altogether? If they're small enough to fit into the context window, boom, you stuff all of them in and let the long context model get a super deep understanding of that specific, relevant information. But if it's too big, no problem. It just falls back to a normal RAG approach. It's brilliant, right? All right, so that's a lot of theory.
how do you actually apply all this to your project? Let's boil it down to a super simple, practical checklist you can use to make the right call right from the get-go. It all starts with you asking yourself a few core questions. First off, scale. How many documents are you dealing with? A handful or a few thousand? That's probably your biggest decision point right there. Next, how many queries are you going to handle? 100 a month or more than 1,000? And how often does your information get updated? And finally, the big one, security. Do you need to control who sees what? Just thinking through these is going to point you in the right direction. So here's your 4-step plan to turn all this talk into a real decision. 1. Get a real count of your documents and a solid estimate of your query volume. 2. Run the numbers. Don't just guess. Actually calculate the monthly cost for both approaches for your use case. 3. Think about the day-to-day stuff, like update speed and security. And 4, and this is the most important one, test it. Grab a small sample of your actual documents and run some real queries. The results will probably make the choice crystal clear. So, you see, choosing between long context and RAG isn't just some minor technical detail. It's a huge strategic choice that really defines what's possible for your project. It's about your budget, your scale, and your capabilities. But now you've got the framework. You know the questions to ask, and you know how to find the answers. So go on. Go build something amazing.